Okay, did you get the little voice message that was saying we were going? Okay, perfect. All right, so in the beginning of a lesson, there's three main parts. We have the vocabulary. This is where you introduce maybe 5 or 6 words to your students to help them practice the vocabulary that they will see in the book. The second part is usually a game or an activity. This helps students practice the vocabulary even more. And the third part is a bridge activity. And this helps introduce the themes of the story. Okay, so now we'll go into more detail of each section. All right, so vocabulary words. So it's important to review some vocabulary words from the book in English to help students, okay? So there's a few reasons why we like to do this. Reviewing a few vocabulary words helps students learn new English. So if your students are just learning, this is a good way for them to practice and expand their English vocabulary. It's also helpful because then the students will understand some of the words in the book. So as you're reading, they might see the words that you introduced. So if the word is love, you can see up here, one of the vocabulary words is love. As you're reading the story, if they see the word love, they'll already know what that word means. So it will help them understand what's happening on the page. And then it's important when you introduce new vocabulary words, you should say the word and have the students repeat. So if the word is love, I'm the teacher, I would say love. And then Maida and Sally, could you demonstrate saying it back?
Love. And I might give a hug or even hug myself when I'm saying the word.
Or make the symbol, which I'm not doing so well.
Yeah, so that's the second point, is to also have an action. This also helps the students remember. So you can say love and show a heart. Or you can do love and give a hug.
Or yes, and hold your heart.
Or hold your heart, yeah. Or, thumping heart.
Put your hand on your heart, yeah.
Yeah. So create an action to go with the word. You can also use the word in a sentence. So this helps students understand how they can use the word in their life. So if the word is love, you could say for your sentence, I love my teacher. Or I love my teacher. Or I love my best friend. So you can use it in a sentence to demonstrate how they can use the word. And the last point here is you can also translate the word if you need to. Okay, so a word like love is pretty easy to teach, right? If you show a heart, if you show the hug, students should be able to understand what the word love means if English is not their first language. But if you need to, and that's okay too, you can translate the word to make sure that they all understand the meaning. Okay. So for example, let's do a demo, maybe Maida and Sally. Can you see these words in the top right that we have for this book?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to demonstrate maybe how you would do this in your class, okay? So the first word is give.
Okay, Sally.
I will give you my phone.
Okay, so remember, we're just doing a call and repeat first, and then we'll do our sentence after, okay? So Sally made it, ready? Give.
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 I will give you my pencil.
I will give you my phone.
All right, the next word is love.
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 I love my neighbor.
And I love my mother.
And I love chocolate.
Oh,
All right, the next word is find.
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 I need to find my cell phone. It's missing.
I can't find my book. Oh, here it is from last week.
And I need to find my notebook to take notes. So I need to find my notebook.
Okay, so that's just a little demonstration of how you can use actions, like how we showed give, love, and find.
Woo, I found it.
Yeah, to help students just to keep practice and to have fun with it. Okay, so these are about how to introduce vocabulary words. Now I want you to think about this question, and I want some of you to share. I know some of the librarians last summer in the last training, they were able to use vocabulary words with their students. So I'd love to hear from some of you about how you used vocabulary words with your students and why your students liked it. So Francine, I don't know who can share, but I know some of us last summer, like Consolee, Esther, we did this last summer. So maybe one of you could share why it's important to do vocabulary words.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hello, Shauna.
Hi, Francine. We can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Esther, can you share or Console? They were there in the training last summer.
Hello.
Hi, Esther.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can I share?
Yes, please.
Okay. The reason why we need to use vocabulary in the first part of the book or of the lesson is this. It's because when you are going to read the storybook for your children, your children, they don't know about the story. So you need to introduce first by using some new words that is will come several times in the story. When you are using this vocabulary practice, you are catching the attention of your children so that when you are reading, they may be curious and paying attention to what you are reading for. And the importance of starting with practicing vocabulary is this. Without telling them the vocabularies, they will not be interested about your book, what you are going to read. But when you first tell them the vocabulary, the children will enjoy your story, the children will pay attention, and the children will not be bored about what you are reading. They will enjoy the story. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. That was really good to hear from your own perspective. Thank you.
Hello, Shauna.
Yes, Francine.
I wanted to add a few.
Yes.
To start with the vocabulary word is to wake up the mind of children. As you know, we use English in read aloud. Some of the students, they don't understand everything in English. Even as the teachers, we don't understand some words. So it's good to start with explain them. There's the words like to wake up them to to help them to understand where the story. Also to learn English, to teach them to have the new words in English.
Thank you, Francine. Yeah, it's helpful for students who maybe don't have English to practice some new words and to get.
Hello,
Yeah,
can I add other things?
sure. Who is this?
Marie Paul,
Oh, hi, Maripol.
hi. Another things I need to add there, it is like me, sometimes I read in Kinyarwanda. And even if it is not English, there is some word in Kinyarwanda, the children, they don't understand what it is. It is good first to tell them about those words. And when I finish to read, I ask again, there is things you don't understand. They say other vocabulary, the new word they had. And it is good for them to learn something for them they don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Maripol. It seems some people cannot hear, and I'm sorry about that. But also, just so you know, we are recording. So if you cannot hear very well, you can watch later. You can watch the video after, and hopefully you can hear better. But thank you so much for these really good answers from Esther, Francine, and Mary Paul. It's all things that are so important. So now I would like to think about, let's think about now, if you are given a new book, or if you find a new book, how would you choose the vocabulary words?
Hello.
Hi, yes.
We are very happy with this lesson, but I don't know. I want to know what difference we have without hug someone and to love someone. So we have a difficult there. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so the hug was just the action to show love, but if that's confusing, then that's totally okay. You can do a different action for love. You can show a heart, or you can show some other way that you can show love. So
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
don't need to do the actions we thought of. They're just examples. But you can do a heart, or you can do, you can, on your chest, you can point to your heart and you can show how your heart beats and try to say love that way.
Yes, I understand.
All right, thank you so much for the question. Any other questions, or would anyone like to try to answer this question that I asked?
What question you say?
Can you see the question on the screen?
No question, please.
All right, I'm sharing my screen. If you're on your phone, you might need to change the view so you can see the shared screen.
Yes, I'll do.
Okay. Hopefully you can see it. And Esther, would you like to respond?
Yes, I want to answer this question of how do we choose the vocabulary words in the book. The first thing we have to do when we are going to choose the vocabulary words from the story, we first need to look in the book. As librarian, we first need to read the book. After reading the book, you will know those vocabularies or those words which is coming several times in the book. Those words which is coming several times in the book, you have to choose them as vocabulary. You need to teach your children first. And also you need to check the vocabularies which is very difficult to understand, because those words which is very difficult, it's very important to teach them before you read the story. So the first thing you need to know is those words which is coming several times in the story, and those words which is very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. So Esther mentioned 2 ideas about how to choose vocabulary words. So the first idea is words that are repeated many times in the storybook. Sometimes there's a word that you hear over and over, and you want your students to know what the word is. Or the second one is words that are very difficult. So from last week, if you remember our book, Decision is kind of a difficult word. So you might need to explain and introduce the word decision so your students can understand what's happening in the book. Any other ideas? Thank you so much for sharing, Esther. Any other ideas about how to choose vocabulary words? Yes, Albert?
You know, for this vocabulary, we have many problems. Many guys this month how to put in action the verb or the vocabulary of to love and to say only I love. So I want to know if we have of the children or the children we want to difference that the have and the hag, or to put in action to show the difference with the love and the hug. For instance, you can say I hug some people, or that people will be or have a difficult to difference the hug and the love. So I want to know now.
Yeah, you can show, you're still thinking about these actions. You can choose anything you want to do for your library. So if you think that love is a confusing word, you can translate it and explain what it means. Or you can just use a different word. You don't have to use love. These are just ideas. But you're just choosing words that you think your students might not know and you want to introduce to them. So if there's new words that your students will not understand in the story, then sometimes you need to explain before so they can be prepared to read the book. So even if you were saying if there's some boys in the class who think love is weird or I don't know, awkward or something, that's okay. Just tell them these are words that we will see in our book. Okay, so you don't have to spend too much time on the word love. You could talk about the other words. Because if you look here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. Give, love, find, cry, run, climb, come. So there's other words. So it's, if love is confusing, you can skip it, or you can just explain it quickly to your students. Okay. But yeah, don't worry too much about the action. And if your students are uncomfortable, I think you just explain to them, we all love somebody. We love our friends, we love our parents, our teachers, but that's just a small part. But choosing the words, I'd say, is more difficult. And I think, sorry, Bindu, but I think Albert is raising their hand if you would like to share something. Albert, if you can still hear us.
To teach a student and also the vocabulary, it's in the chat,
Oh, okay.
across all subject areas.
Oh, thank you. I did not see the chat. Albert, would you like to share out loud with everybody?
Yes, yes, thank you for all things there. And now I need that if we found some books, when you will find or see the image, okay, when you will see the example of someone who practice this that we are you are saying, when we'll found this book and we are in a class, for instance we are in a class and we show the image for the child, perhaps they will understand very good and they will give the difference between that we are studying. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing. Would anyone else like to share before we move on to the next part? We have some great ideas in the chat box, so if you're able to look and read those, please do. All right, Sally or Maida, any thoughts about vocabulary before we move to the next part?
If
I would like to just say to our friend that is a bit worried about the action, that we encourage dramatizing or role playing of the words so that they hear it, see it, and act it as we encourage good practices in teaching. But we can return to that point some more. And if you have concerns, you can write us in the chat box. And I can respond to you and say, well, have you thought about this? You know, have you thought about a way that you could act out decision making? So Shauna, go ahead though.
I think Sally had something.
I was thinking if there are key action words or keywords from a story and people have the place and the ability to do it, to make a word card. I'm looking for a piece of paper to illustrate, and of course I can't find it. Make a word card with the word and the picture. And if there's a place to keep it in your teaching space while you're working with the book, the children can see it also several times. If it's in your classroom, that helps them, the repetition, even though they're not hearing the story at that moment. The repetition of seeing the little word card with the word and the picture will help them remember it.
Thank you. All right, so just for sake of time, we're going to move to the next part of the beginning, which we like to do after you introduce the vocabulary. And it's a vocabulary activity. So it can be some sort of game or movement activity or talking activity where students can practice the vocabulary words more. So you've just introduced the words, you've had them say the words, we acted out the words, we used a sentence, and now it's helpful to keep practicing by doing a fun game that engages students, or it could be a song or something like that. But the most important thing about the activities is that each student should have a turn. So you can take turns playing the game or singing, but you should hear everybody in the class practicing. Okay, so everyone should be saying the vocabulary words. And also it's important that every student feels comfortable to practice. So for some students, this might be new English words, and they might feel a little bit nervous or unsure how to say the word. So you want to make sure you encourage your students and you keep reminding them. The word is give, give. You try. So you
Give.
always are encouraging students to join and participate. Okay. So for example, for best friends, if you were able to watch the video, we use a pattern game. Okay, so this is a pattern game where you use the actions and you say the word, and the students have to try to remember and copy the pattern. So if the pattern is give, love, find, your students can try and copy. So Sally, Maida, can you do the pattern?
Give,
Love,
love,
find.
Good. And then you can make it harder if you want, or you can go faster or slower, but it's just a fun way to get your students practicing. So if we did it faster to make it harder, we could do give, love, find.
Find. And we both found our phones.
So it's just a fun way to get your students practicing the vocabulary more. Okay.
Also, it keeps them on their toes.
Yeah, exactly. I think someone said it earlier, maybe Francine or someone said, so that your students also don't get bored. We
Yeah.
want them to have fun practicing English and reading the storybooks. So if you can make it as fun as possible, then your students will be engaged and they'll be excited to read the story and to participate. Okay. So the activities, I have some suggestions in the guide I sent you. So I sent you all this document. And here's all the vocabulary activities. If you watch these videos, it shows you how we demonstrate the activity. And if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see this page where I have more activity ideas. So I have the pattern game. There's also a word search. There's many, many ideas and activities that you can do with your students, okay? These are just some examples. All right, before we ask you to discuss with us, we want you to just listen and think for a moment. Okay, so we will not be talking or writing in the chat box, just be thinking in your own mind, okay? So I want you to try to imagine your classroom or picture your library in your head. Okay, do you see your students? You should see the room. Just imagine you're in your library, okay? It's just we're pretending. And I want you to think, is there enough space for students to get up and move around? Is there enough space in your classroom? Or is it maybe smaller and your students cannot stand up? Think about it. Think. Also think about, is it possible for your students to be active, but also well-behaved? Sometimes when students get active and they're playing a game, they can get a little crazy and they can get a little wild. But will your students be able to still listen to instructions and listen to what you are telling them to do? Or if they maybe will get too wild, then maybe it's better to do an activity where they're still in their seats. Or if it's just a few students who are standing. The next question to think about, which Sally mentioned earlier, in your classroom, can you put vocabulary words on the wall? Are you able to write on cards and put them to the wall or on the board so that all the students can see and touch them? As many activities ask the students to touch the words and find the correct vocabulary word. Also think about, would it be possible for your students to talk at the same time? When we introduced a pair share, all your students will be talking in partners, but that means it will get loud because everyone's talking. So is it possible for them to talk at the same time? Or do you like to have one student go at a time? All right, so be thinking about these questions, imagining your classroom if these things are possible. Now that you've thought about it and you've pictured your classroom, what activities can you do with your students? Would anyone like to share? It looks like Biani, you've unmuted. Would you like to share something? Maybe we can't. hear. Would anyone like to share? What activities can you do? Or maybe if you did the training last summer, what activities did you do in your library?
Hello.
Hi, yes.
May I make some inquiries? What's the question about? I'm not well conversant with the question.
With this question or this one?
No, the question you've asked me.
Yeah, so now that we've thought about our classrooms and our libraries that we teach in, I want you to tell me some ideas of activities that you can do with your students. So we introduced this idea of the vocabulary activity for students to practice the vocabulary words. And but I know that it's not possible for everyone to do some of these activities. So I wanted you to think about your classroom or your library and tell us what is possible. What can you do with your students?
Well, it depends, I think. It depends on the story one has. In the first place, I think you first of all formulate a story of what they are going to read about. Then within the story, you highlight the keywords. I would say the vocabularies. As the learners are reading, then you tell them to at least underline those words which are somewhat difficult for them. Then later on after reading, you go ahead and do some explanations. You explain word per word for further understanding of the learners. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we're introducing today, this is what we hope you do before you read the story. So as the teacher, you'll look through the book and you'll see what words might be difficult for your students. And then before you read, you can explain some of these words and you can have your students practice these vocabularies that might be difficult. So that when you start to read, then they'll already know what the words are. Does that make sense? So we're hoping that you do this. That's why it's called the beginning. We're hoping you do these things before you read.
Yeah, but it depends on the level of the learners.
Yeah.
Like, I would suggest, we have different levels and of course people with different categories or different abilities. not all learners can maybe learn at the same time. For example, if you're teaching the lower primary, you have to do that first. And remember, some of them even have some difficulties in reading some of these words here. So you first of all, teach them how to read them.
Yeah, you're helping them to practice because we understand that for many students, these words might be new, right? So just like you said, everyone has different abilities. And that's why we hope before you read that you can practice many times, you can play a game or do actions to help students remember the words longer. But yeah, what you say is a very important point. Some of our students have different abilities and might not understand, but that's why it's important to introduce a few words so that as they're reading, if they don't know all of the words, at least they can find the one, oh, give. I know what give means now. And they'll start to make sense of the book on their own. Thank you so much for your question. I appreciate and your concern too.
Yes, yes.
I don't know. I have a few people raising their hands. Sally, I think you had your hand up first. Did you want to share something? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah. When thinking about your question, I remember having a very small classroom with not a lot of room to act out, like jump and leap and hop. So with my students, I had them imagine that they had a little box, that they had a little space, and literally the only space they could move was, I'm going to stand up and then I'll disappear, right in front of their chair, so that when they jumped right by their chair, 3 jumps, and then they sat down. So space and where your ability to is important. So that's one thought.
Thanks, Sally.
And at the end, Shauna, I would like to come in to reflect on the previous speaker. So just please keep in mind that we're encouraging reading the story aloud to the students. They're not at this point reading the book. They don't at this point have the book in front of them. And we read aloud because we can bring the student into the meaning of the story through knowing the vocabulary in advance and the way that we read the story. And we'll be doing that next week. And we get concerned when we ask the students to identify the words that they don't understand, because that gets in the way of understanding the meaning. That's why Shauna is leading us to think about the vocabulary that they will need to be able to understand the meaning of the story. And if you have further questions, we would be happy to engage with you via email.
Thank you, Maida. All right, if no one else has a thought, and I recognize we're running low on time. And I see Burton just put in the chat that when you learn through play, students acquire more vocabularies. And that's exactly when you're playing and when the kids are having fun, they want to remember the words. You know, it becomes natural. So thank you for making that point. Okay, so the last part of the beginning. So remember, before we read the story aloud, you'll be looking at the vocabulary, you will do an activity, and the last thing is called the bridge activity. So again, this requires a bit of imagination, a bit of creativity. Imagine we are standing on one side of a bridge. We just learned some vocabulary. We've practiced the vocabulary. Now we're getting ready to start reading the story. We're getting ready to move to the next part of the lesson and begin reading aloud. Okay? But before we cross the bridge, before we get there, a bridge activity is a good transition. Okay? It gets students to think about the main topic of the book. So for example, in Best Friends, the bridge activity we used is called a friend circle map. So this gets students thinking about, just like you did at the beginning of the session, it gets you thinking about what makes a good friend? Who are my friends? Why are they my friends? And they're thinking about this, so when they start reading about the best friend, then they'll be connecting it to their own life and their friends. And this part is super important. One of the main things that a bridge activity does is it helps students to be more engaged in the book. Okay? And a bridge activity is very short. You can just ask 1 or 2 questions. So at the beginning, I asked you, what is one word that describes your friend? Just one question, it's very easy. And this is a good activity for a pair share. So remember, we talked a lot about the pair share. Bridge activities are a good time to tell your students, okay, turn and talk with a partner. Tell your partner why your friend, or what makes a good friend. And then after they all talk with their partner, you can have them come back and a few students can share with the whole class. So I wanted to have Francine talk a little bit about the circle activity that she did with Emma. So Francine, if you would like to explain how you did this in your library and how the students felt about doing the activity.
Thank you so much, Shauna. I had a problem with my computer. I'm using a phone. I can say about this picture. When we did read aloud on the book called Best Friends, this is one of the way we used it to help the students to learn about the new vocabularies and to help them to understand well the story of Best Friends. This is the circle map. Let me call it circle map, the one of where we can use. You see there is a circle inside. We put the word friends. Then all the students, they were able to explain like how we did it when we start our training. Each student say what is his friend or her friend, and they start this description. Then we write all the students, they said one word or 2 words. This is good to use it because when you have like a table or somewhere you can put this paper, the students still remember the words, still remember the story, and they learn from each other. Because when I say, I describe my friend is someone who loves me. Another one is someone who play with me. So I learn a new words from my neighbor, from my friend. It is good to use this kind of game, circle map, because it helps the students to still remember the new words they learn in the story. Thank you, Shauna.
Thank you so much, Francine. That was amazing to hear your perspective of how it helped your students. And I loved a few things you said, especially when you said that you put it in your classroom so that other students could see after the lesson was over. And they can go back and they can see, oh yeah, this is what we talked about in our Read Aloud today. And I love some of these answers. They're so creative. Like this one, a friend is someone who you can share your feelings with. It's down here in the bottom. That's why I like my friends. I share my feelings with them all the time, maybe too much. But thank you so much for sharing how this worked in your class. You said it perfectly. And I'm glad that we could have your example to show. But this is an idea, right? And you see some of the vocabulary words that we taught too, right? You have give, love. You have some of the words also in here that they keep practicing. I like this one. Buy you sweet things. A friend is someone who buys you sweet things. That's cute.
I think someone is trying to get in.
Yes, yeah. Vinay.
Hello?
Yes.
Are you getting me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think you're muted if you're still trying to share something. Okay, well, hopefully he can join again in a minute. But I just, wanted to say thank you to Francine for sharing this example. And I don't know, before we finish and go to the exit ticket, is there anyone else from last summer who used the bridge activity and wants to explain how it worked in their library?
Sorry, Shauna, repeat again the question.
I was saying if there's anyone else from the training last summer who would like to share how they use the bridge activity. Okay. Well, so Esther, go ahead.
Okay. How we use bridge activity in our libraries, especially when we want our children to know about new words and vocabularies and enjoying lesson. It's when we can use the games and also we can draw charts and then you hang them on the wall so that the children, when they come or they see what we hang on the charts on the wall, they say, oh, that is good. And then they will enjoying because they have something to hook their attention.
Yeah.
So when we put the vocabularies on charts, it's the best way for me.
Yeah, so thank you so much sharing how it's important to put your vocabulary words on a chart and on the wall so that students can continue to look at it and to learn from the new words. Thank you so much. So really just the main important part of the bridge activity is it helps you transition into the story. So now that you've learned many vocabulary words, now you want students to think about the main topic of the book and to get excited to read the story. So if they're talking about what makes a good friend, they'll be excited to read the story that is about a best friend. Okay, so it just helps to get students excited to read and to understand what to expect in the story. Any thoughts, Maida or Sally, about a bridge activity before we close?
Well, I just want to emphasize what you said, it provides a context. It gives them a whole broader ability to follow and to understand the theme of the story. So we're encouraging that you do this work up front so that the students have been prepared to get into the meaning of the story. And that we will discuss next time. But this is a very important part, to be able to get the students to be able to respond to the lesson or meaning of what is to be learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maida. Yeah, the beginning is very important to get students ready to read, to hear the story. All right, so before we go, because we're at 9 o'clock, or I think it's 4 o'clock your time now, maybe. But as you leave, I want you to think about this question, and I would like some of you to share your answer. How does the beginning of a lesson help prepare students to read the story? So we've just explained what happens in the beginning. You introduce vocabulary, you play a game or sing a song to practice the vocabulary, and then you do a bridge activity for students to start thinking about the main topic of the story. So I would like some of you to unmute and share, or you can type in the chat box. I would like you to share how the beginning of a lesson helps prepare students to read the story.
Hello, can I answer?
Yes, Marie Paul, thank you.
Yeah. Another things I do, it is to show them the picture on the cover. And they help them to like the story I'm going to read for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the beginning is all about getting them excited to read this story. Thank you. Anybody else?
And Console says, yeah, to show the topic of the book. That's, we all use our own different words, Console. But I really encourage us to frame it in our own words, even if you agree with the answers that have been given.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else like to share?
Hello.
Yes,
according to the beginning of lesson, how it can help the children when they are going to read the story. Like when you finish to introduce the vocabularies and when you hook at their attention, so it's a best way, because before you do all those things, the children can be bored and they can't follow you as well. But after telling them the vocabulary or practicing some obliged activities, the children will not be bored, and the children will have more curiosity to the story. And when you show them the picture or tell them the topic of the book, they will ask themselves, what is going to be in the book? What is happening the next? So that's the importance of being prepared before the lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. So Esther shared that it helps get students excited and curious about what's going to happen in the book. And it helps, I think you said, hook their attention. I like that. I like that phrase. It helps hook the attention of the students so that they're excited to keep reading and they're curious. Thank you so much, Esther. And then from Bert Tim, he said, it's good to talk with the students in the beginning so they can get new vocabularies. Yes, thank you. And also new vocabularies that they will see in the book so that they'll be able to hopefully have a better understanding of what the book is about. Any other, oh, we see we have one more. And Sally said, it's good to relate the story to their life. So it's good to connect students and tell them that they have similar things happening in their life. They also have a best friend who helps them when they're in need. Or they also have a community that needs to make a big decision. So yeah, it helps the students see themselves in the story.
And I would like to emphasize those 2 points again. Putting themselves in the story so that they will be able to get the lesson or meaning from it when we get to the story. But
Any final reflections that people would like to share? All right. So I want to remind you all that I shared this document with you in the WhatsApp group. So I know some of you are saying you couldn't hear very well and maybe you were not understanding, but this document that I shared, it really describes everything that we talked about. It talks about why it's important to do vocabulary words, why it's important to do a bridge activity. So I ask you to read this again if you have not already, and to watch. If you go down, you can watch these videos. If you click on it, you can go to the YouTube and you can see the demonstration that we've made of the vocabulary. So it's going slow, but you get the idea. There it goes. So this is the best friend demonstration where we demonstrate the vocabulary and the activity. So we really encourage you to read this, to watch these videos, so you can continue to understand and to practice these ideas so that when it's your turn to teach in a library or in your classroom, you'll be ready to teach your students. Okay. And we've sent in the chat, in the WhatsApp group, we've been sending some homework for you to do. I know it sounds silly because children are supposed to have homework, but we are asking you to do some things before our training. So in between our sessions, there are some tasks and some things we would like you to do to prepare for the next session. Okay, so for the next session, we'll be talking about the next part of the lesson, which is actually reading aloud, reading the story to your students. And so I will send a similar document like this one that will have all the important information for the middle, okay? So it's very important that you do the work in between the sessions, okay? Maida, any final thoughts before?
well, I couldn't emphasize more. We have the material is there for you to watch on your own time. And it will make the time we are together more helpful to all of us. So we strongly request, or sincerely request, that you prepare before you come.
I want to thank everyone who participated. We had some good discussion today and some good examples from those who have done the training before. So I thank you for participating. And I hope you all have a good rest of your evening.